Welcome to the Insurance Revolutionized podcast brought to you by Success Without Sacrifice. I am your host and coach, Cherie Sauer, and here on the podcast, we are on a mission to revolutionize the way women in insurance do business. We will be interviewing women who are changing the face of insurance, as well as giving you tips and inspiration to grow your agency to new heights without sacrificing what is most important to you. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Insurance Revolutionized podcast. I'm so excited for my guest today. This is the first time we are going to have someone on who is actually not in the insurance industry. But I brought Amy Thomson on today because she is the CEO and founder of the Moody app. And if you guys have been listening to this podcast for long, if you know me, if you've been around me, you've probably heard me talk about the Moody app and how it has helped me and changed the way that I really do business and how we teach other women how to do business. So I did a podcast episode on harnessing the power of your female physiology. And when I finished that episode, I was like, what if I could actually get the person who created this app on the podcast? And so I did some Google searches and I found Amy and I reached out to her and she graciously agreed to come on the podcast. So I'm so excited for you guys to hear kind of her background and why she created the Moody app and where that came from. But before we get into this, Amy, thank you so much for being here. I know it's nighttime for you. You're on the other side of the world. So tell us a little bit about you and who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. And I think it's always really important to talk about the app wherever possible. And I am on the other side of the world. I'm actually at the moment based in Morocco, but my time is based between Morocco and the UK. The app originated in the UK in London and has obviously had a life of its own in terms of growth. I think because so many people can relate to the very simple reality that understanding the basis of your hormones can help elevate so many other aspects of your life. And it, as I said before when we were speaking earlier, it came from a very personal place. Majority of people that I speak to in the same way as you've talked about is burnout is a very, very real problem. And a lot of that comes from a lack of understanding about actually how our systems and the function of our body works. My personal experience was I had a business before starting Moody, which was primarily looking at how you could utilize digital media to optimize the brands. So very early stage before Instagram even existed. And we were really early in that kind of digital media revolution. And it was incredibly successful, which was very exciting. However, there wasn't really an off switch for what my life looked like. There wasn't really a moment where I could take a breather and draw a line between what work was looking like in terms of the growth versus what I was willing to kind of, slow down on, because at the time it was just momentum over momentum. That took a huge toll on my body, and I didn't know that my period stopping actually was directly correlated to that work stress. This was in 2016. And the landscape in terms of conversations about periods and hormones, we think of 2016 as not that long ago, but actually it was a very different space. And I realized the only conversation that was really available about it was around fertility or contraception. My experience was that I had spent a year trying to discover why my periods had stopped and also why generally my whole body was essentially falling apart. I wasn't sleeping. I was gaining weight. I was exercising every day. I was running about 5K a day, and I was actually getting more unhealthy. And what I didn't realize was I was overstretched. So my stress and my cortisol, adrenaline hormones were incredibly high. My adrenal glands were just overstretched. And actually me exercising all the time and inducing additional cortisol through cardio exercise, plus travel and everything else, was actually compounding the problem. It wasn't helping resolve it. And I realized that there was a massive, massive gap in what we're told about how our bodies work and what we need to do to solve the problem. Because actually the health and wellness industry, much like you said about kind of being very male dominated in insurance, although women dominate purchase behavior of health and wellness and often dominate a lot of the visual aesthetic, the functionality of health and wellness, this idea of you get up every day and you do the same routine. So take running, for example. You need to run in exactly the same way as a man. And that's just not the case. Your body doesn't operate in the same way. The way in which your body produces and regulates over a monthly cycle is very different. And we're exercising and we're eating in this way of get up every day, do the same thing. And actually we need to think about the way that our body is operating to help inform better routines and rituals. And optimizing around your cycle is one way, not the only way, but one way to build a routine that's actually more relevant to your body and your system. So that's where the idea of Moody was born. I realized that actually there was also not a single pill to solve burnout. You don't suddenly go to the doctor and say, hey, I'm burnt out, help me, and they give you a pill. You have to go through a huge process of rehabilitation with your body. It can take years, but it took me about 12 months to re-regulate my body to get my stress levels down. And again, that wasn't from a pharmaceutical solution. That was from balanced diet, changing a lot of the way in which I was exercising, not over exercising, not doing strenuous kind of cardio every day. And also hugely changing this perception of what made me happy. This idea that I had to push myself endlessly. I had to reframe and actually investing in self-care, taking myself for a massage, these things that I'd perceived at that point to being luxurious. And when I've got the time to do it, I'll do it. I didn't actually realize were fundamental to my body's ability to function, especially in high stress situations. So the app was born out of a personal need, but also I decided to sell the company that I'd built to build this, because I realized that actually the more and more that I was aware of what I was working on and the stress it was causing me, the more and more I realized that's not just me, that's a lot of other women in the world. And if we want to create successful platforms for women to succeed, we have to also start from the fundamentals of your body. And it's great to earn loads of money, but it's not great when you're doing that at the cost of your health. So it came from a view that actually if my legacy in the world was going to be anything, I would much prefer for it to be this than digital media. So I decided to start and work with doctors and start the research there. So it started from a personal and a professional position, but the app has now been in the world since 2019 and continues to, I think, improve, which is also testament to the experts and the people we have within the wider team. And I guess my role is maintaining and making sure that we're innovating within this space to ensure we're thinking about what the future of this kind of science and research also looks like to help improve the experience of women in the long game.
Yeah, one of the things that I really loved, oh gosh, I have so much I want to pull out here, but one of the things I really loved about the app when I learned about cycle tracking and kind of started looking into this and had read a couple books that were helpful for this awareness, but I still had a really hard time tracking it and really just understanding the different symptoms of my body. And so I think I just I at one point I was using Apple Health and, it's super basic and it just wasn't enough to really help me. And then I think I just was looking on the App Store, and just happened to find the Moody app. There was that one and another one. And I looked into it and I was like, wow, this, I can track my symptoms. I can see everything that's happened over the last month and being able to really see it in that grand scheme. But the other thing that I really, really love about the Moody app is it's not just about tracking your cycle. It's stress management. It's learning to listen to your body and understand where your body's at and not pushing it beyond its limits. And we live in this society of harder, faster, stronger. And we think if we just push more and do more, then that's going to get us to where we want to be, until you look around and it's yes, I have all this success, but how do I feel at the end of the day, right? Success and money isn't what's going to fulfill us. And we think that chasing this achievement is, once I get to this level, then I can have the massage. Then I'll have more time, right? And that's not how it works. We have to prioritize it right now. So I just love that the Moody app is really a holistic approach in supporting the whole woman. It's not just about tracking your symptoms and your cycle.
Yeah. And I think to your point there, like, we're conditioned to believe that actually we need to be successful. We have to push ourselves to our limits. And it's really, even in this kind of new revolution of health and wellness, there's still a missing link where women are still responsible for huge amounts more labor in the world, whether that be responsibilities of childcare or responsibilities of parent care or just family kind of support generally. Often 70% of that kind of role does still sit with the women. And whether we want society to be more progressive or not, we have to also be realistic about the fact that there is a huge amount more responsibility, therefore, and more pressure and more stress on our bodies just from the very society and the structure in which it's been built. So I think it's really important for this re-education and almost, I don't think about bodies as robots, but I say reprogramming in the sense that rethinking about the way that our health and wellness needs to be central, not secondary, so that we can also be more optimal, so that you can achieve the success we want to achieve. And we can also have the ability to be more multidisciplinary and multitasking, because our body fundamentally is designed well, I think, fundamentally, and we're just not given the tools to be able to understand it. And then we're put into a society and then told, you need to succeed and you need to do all these things without any rule book or without any kind of guidance. And I think it's a very conflicting reality. And the app was designed to make it really easy. Like, if I were to give myself as a teenager a rule book of just the basics of what would help me in optimizing around my mind body, this would have been the baseline of that. And it shocks me even today that it didn't exist before. So I'm really glad that it's serving the purpose that it was intended to deliver. And I think one of the things that we get a lot of feedback from users and from people actually getting the benefit from it is this reality that it just helps them understand where they're at. And that is because the information within our bodies is there. We just have to learn how to read it. And there's a lot of conflict in terms of when we first started around, is technology even the right vehicle for this? And technology can be part of the problem. It can compound the stress. It can compound the kind of reality of in which we're living, where we're permanently switched on. So we designed the app around this really simple function of, it's something that you pick up, you look at, and then you put down. It's not got an infinite scroll. It's not highly addictive, but it is a habit forming behavior around just a simple check-in where you look at the information, you look at what the relevant piece of kind of content might be for you for that day in terms of your cycle, the information about what that means in relation to mind body, and then also self-reporting, and then you put it down. Like, it's about then existing within the real world with that information, much like a weather forecast, to help arm you with what you need to do in the day. And it's really positive to see that just the impact that that's having. And technology does have a part in a positive way to play, therefore, in how we can actually get this science and this research into as many hands as possible.
Yeah, that's a really interesting approach. I love that you thought about that really intentionally, because you're right. Social media and being on our phones and attached all the time is part of the problem. And so much that, if we get lost in scrolling on social media, or, even if we're watching TV and eating at the same time, we can't be aware of what our body is saying. And so I love that you were really intentional about that. And, a lot of social media, their goal is to keep you on their app, or apps are designed to keep you on their app and keep coming back. And, yes, you're going to keep coming back, but you did it in a way where people could just look at it and have the information they need and then put it away. And I really love, I used to get so frustrated and mad at myself because I would have these days where I felt on top of the world. I had a hard time sleeping. I didn't need a lot of sleep. I could go 5 hours or 6 hours and sleep, and I would still have energy that day. And not saying that that's what you should do. I'm just saying that that's just how my body is sometimes. And, I could be super creative and do all of this stuff. And then a week later, it would be gone. And I would feel like my brain was mush, and I would be so frustrated, and I would feel so tired and like I needed a nap. And I would think, what is wrong with me? Did I eat something? And so it was just always this like guessing game, and even like imposter syndrome showing up, like certain times of the month. And I just always thought there was something wrong with me. And I would get so mad because I would see these other people who were like killing it in business. And I was like, how do they do it? How do they keep up? But at the end of the day, a lot of them are burnt out, right? Because they're pushing their bodies past their limits. And like you said, women have more responsibility. They just do. And it's not going to change, right? Like, yes, we can ask our spouses and our kids, and we can delegate and automate, and we can do those things. But at the end of the day, a majority of home responsibilities fall on women. And that's just how it is. And we need a framework to be able to help women to balance both life and business, because you can't keep them as separate entities. And if you do, that's where the problem is. And I love that the Moody app is really helping support in that way.
Yeah, and also it's what you said there about asking for help and knowing when to ask for help, because there are points in the month where you actually feel like you could take on the world, right? And, these hormones do have different effects for different people. So for some people, that kind of first phase of the cycle where your estrogen's rising post-bleed and you're getting this kind of elevated experience, some people actually that can create disruption in sleep, or it can create other things, but actually it is, as a general rule, the kind of rise phase of like feeling really elevated. And you might not need as much help in that point, because you might actually be feeling a lot more strong and a lot more capable in the dynamics of the world in which you're inhabiting. But it's that shift from post-ovulation where your kind of progesterone actually starts to rise, and therefore kind of leveling out, and therefore your estrogen isn't as high. And the progesterone is more of a sedating hormone. It can kind of create this more kind of lethargic feeling, but also post-ovulation, you've got this processing out of the old hormones. So your body has gone through this process of building up your hormonal structure towards ovulation. Your egg is released, and then your body has to actually essentially, I don't like to use the word detoxify, but it is the technical term, detoxify the kind of hormones that have been used in that process. So your liver, your kidneys are actually under more strain and more stress in that kind of second half of your cycle, because they're actually helping your body process out those old hormones. So what we also don't realize is when you're in a very high stress environment and your body is also highly stressed generally, your kidneys and your liver are overstimulated, because they're also having to process out the cortisol and adrenaline that you're creating in the day. So there's a disproportionate balance for those women that are quite highly functioning and are kind of, working longer hours, etc. That also that point of your cycle is probably even more compounded, and probably could be causing you more cramps, could be causing you more stress, could be causing you more fatigue, more PMS symptoms, because your liver and your kidneys are actually even further overstimulated. And so even more important to be able to know when that's happening, not because you might need to change your behavior, not even necessarily that you need to change your work routine, but you might be the moment where you think, okay, this is the moment where I'm just not going to have any alcohol or any coffee for the next week to just help my kidneys and my liver. This is the moment where I'm going to ask my partner, or I'm going to ask somebody just to give me a hand, because I'm going to find it harder to get up in the morning, and I'm going to not sleep as well at night. These are the kind of moments where I'm most likely to have an argument with my partner, or with my kids, or with the people around me. And I'm just going to ask them to give me some extra space, because I'm likely to feel a bit more moody. It's about the language we use, not to necessarily change the position of our lives, but just to help navigate around these issues, but understanding it's the why behind the feeling, and the why behind the function of wellness as well. And your liver and your kidneys are pretty essential to your life. And, we're in a world where, we're not going to completely start, I don't believe you completely living clean and lean, cutting out all elements of kind of indulgence of your life, and whatever that looks like for you, it is not necessarily that realistic. But to know that there's 1 week every single month that if you just reduce the amount of kind of impacts of whether it be sugar or alcohol or coffee or whatever it is, or the combination of all three, and sometimes in my case, Knowing that you just remove those things at that point completely can transform the optimization and your energy. And then understanding, okay, well, this is the point in my month where I'm going to be extra hydrated, because that's the other thing about your liver and your kidneys is you get more dehydrated at that point of the month, because especially if you're stressed, your body is actually removing the water as quicker than you need it to, and your body needs more water to process out the old hormones post-ovulation. And so things like, extra hydration, extra support within hydration, magnesium, things like spirulina, which tastes like a pond, but at that point in the month is incredible because it has this antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties, and it's this idea that, we have to take all these pills and do all these things all month. And actually, okay, if it's hard to build routines which are so regimented, but understanding why you're doing it, and at the very least in that 1 or 2 week window, trying to be more conscientious of why you're doing it, because it's going to help your body process out this incredible, system that you've got inside you, and reset for the next month and give you even more energy in that kind of rise phase to be able to achieve even more. So that I think it's this understanding of the why behind wellness and the why behind self-care that really helps you then engage with it properly. So I'm so pleased that it lands for so many, we have hundreds of thousands of users now, and it lands on this level where people really, they recall back to us what the intention was in the first place of creating it. So it's amazing to hear.
Yeah. And I think too, you had said it's not necessarily about changing what you do, but having the awareness. And I think being able to give yourself grace too, right? Yeah. Of like, that's why it's okay that my brain feels like mush. Like maybe I'm not going to get done as much as I thought I was going to do today, and that's okay. And understanding that it is okay, and not being mad at your body because it's not performing the way you want to, because you can't force it to do, you can, right? You can try to force it to do something. But is it really going to be productive and as good a quality versus, if you just allow and understand where your body is at? And that was like super powerful for me, I think, because I am a high performer, and anybody that's listening to this is a high performer, right? And we want our bodies to be in peak performance all the time. And it's just not realistic. That's not how our bodies function. And the work week was really designed around a men's cycle, right? Which is, they're more productive in a 24-hour period. And so we have tried to fit ourselves in this box, that we really don't fit in, and we don't need to fit in.
Yeah. And I think it's also this idea that, what does high performance can look like? You can create consistency in the way that you operate as long as you yourself know when to pull and when to push, right? So where there's this kind of ability to look at it across a month. So rather than thinking, exactly as you said, rather than thinking about things around, okay, what can I achieve in my day? What can I achieve in my week? It's like breaking it into 2-week cycles, and also thinking about how you plan your work systems. I mean, we do this in the business as well, and it's really efficient, where you look at the things that you're going to be able to do and multitask in the first part, and then you try and coordinate with more people and more kind of team around the second half. So where actually you're working more independently, and I mentioned this to you before, but we have a fully remote team because we realize, firstly, all the engineers and the data analysts and the academics that we work with, they're all women, and a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have kids. And so actually a kind of remote system works well because it means there's more dynamics around how we work. We also work with these kind of sprints, which is how much work we can achieve within these 2-week windows around the technology and around the kind of, the platform development and innovation. And that's also designed around this idea that we work in 2-week windows. So it's a privilege for me to be able to design my entire business around this, right? But if you if you just think about it in terms of how you structure your systems of, okay, in the next 2 weeks, I want to achieve this. This is where I'm at in my cycle. This is the kind of stuff that's going to take me longer because actually my focus isn't as sharp as it will be before. So therefore, I'm going to allocate more time to these tasks. It's just understanding the difference between how you structure the time versus the results. And then looking at the achievement over your month or over your cycle rather than looking at it over, a week or 24 hours. And that's caveated by the fact that, majority of people are not thinking, okay, I'm going to tell my entire team and start changing my business model around my cycle, because sadly the world is not quite there yet. But I do think in terms of even the way that you journal, the way that you take notes, it's really interesting. My handwriting changes really dramatically, and I still take notes in a notebook. And I see and notice the difference between the notes that I take at the beginning of the month, post bleed, versus those at the end of the month. Stuff just becomes a bit more scrawled. It's like, I've got so much written down, so much detail in the first half, and then it just becomes a little bit more kind of vague and a little bit less detailed in the second half. And I think those elements therefore mean you say, okay, I need to be a lot more conscious about the fact that I need to make sure I'm aware of what I'm writing down in the second half of my month, because I know I'm not going to be as intuitive about just writing all the extra detail that I need. So it's small hacks that I think that I use and generally this information gives you that then helps you create systems that work better for you. And I think help you be more productive and as productive and consistent in the work that you deliver.
Yeah, it's interesting. You said, the world's not really ready for us to come in and make these big changes, but that's really one of our goals for, at least for female insurance agency owners, is really giving a system, to make it work. Right. And I think that's what I was burnt out in my career. I got burnt out as a stay-at-home mom, and I got burnt out as a business owner. And I kept thinking, what is happening? And I realized I needed a checks and balances system. I needed something to give me, I needed a framework, and I feel like that's missing for women. And so one of the things that we do in our coaching, and something that I created from my background in sports medicine, is called the RAMP method. And it's really similar to what you're talking about of understanding your month and designing your business around that. And yes, that's not doable for every corporation, right? And but a lot of the people that are listening to this podcast, they do have smaller teams and they do have flexibility, and it doesn't mean they have to change everything that they do. But the RAMP method is really looking at the normal ebbs and flows of the industry. So for health insurance, for example, their busy season is November through January. And then after that it's slower. And so in some insurance agents, they do multiple different lines of insurance. And so, it can change, but it's really, what are the normal trends of your business, and how can we create intentionality and create seasons within the year of your business, and then within your month, and then within your week and your day. And so that's one of the reasons I really love the Moody app, is because it really aligns with what we do and how we do it, and what we're trying to, the way that we're trying to revolutionize the insurance industry is really if you have a framework and if you have a system that shows you that, yes, this is doable, it can happen. You can make it work. And, we've worked
Absolutely.
with, clients that it is working. And so that's really exciting. And so, really our goal is, we're starting with insurance, but we want to create, other coaches who are certified in the RAMP method that can take it out into other industries.
Yeah, it's amazing, because that actually, it's really interesting in terms of also sales cycles, right? So selling, you have to be, there's a certain kind of mindset that comes with being successful in terms of the conversion and the close. And actually, I've fundraised for this business to be able to build it, at various points within the business. And it is the same, right? The same as closing an insurance deal. It's like anything where there's a sale associated to it. And I think there are different things that within the cycle health, and I imagine what you're talking about in terms of the RAMP method as well, where you're right, if you know you're going to be sharper at certain points, you don't need to be as focused around how you prepare. But if you're having a really busy period and you have to be really consistent with your sales like cycle across that kind of point, whether it be November to January, for example, you have to also have systems in place where you can then adapt to the points in your month where maybe you're not going to feel as solid or as strong, or you might over explain something, you know, or you might find it harder to close the deals at that point. Like, what are the things that you're doing to actually buffer the kind of, you know, the psychological impacts and the kind of potential negative impacts of that point? So yeah, it would be actually, insurance makes a lot of sense for cycle understanding because it's so sales orientated, and anything that has sales orientation, you know, it's okay if you're a novelist, because you can just decide exactly when you want to write or when you don't want to write. I mean, creators obviously have their own, you know, ebbs and flows, but you have specifics, I think, within sales cycles where it's really, really important to understand optimization, much like athletes, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's a really important application. I think, yeah, what you're building sounds incredible. I hope it does get to scale outside of insurance as well, because so many business owners that need, you know, to accept and understand the human physiology within the process of optimization, because we're not robots. We are actually human beings with feelings.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it is, we weren't taught, nobody's given us a system. And just like, you know, around our cycle, if this information didn't exist before, we didn't really understand it. It wasn't common knowledge. And so we just become reactive, right? We just react and we become victims of our circumstances, if you will. But this is being proactive, right? And it's creating intention within your week and within your month, and knowing that you can optimize your systems and your processes, and you know, within your business and also within your life, to work around. And it takes time. And one thing for me, and Amy, I know you, we were talking about this beforehand, but that you just had a baby, and so your hormones are probably a little bit different, right? And that's, for me, one of the things that I've noticed is every month is not consistent for me. So my average cycle is 25 days, but sometimes it can be 22 and sometimes it can be like 30. And I'm working on trying to regulate those hormones. But after pregnancy, especially if you've had multiple children, it does change, and you no longer have this like set, you know, like consistency. And so that can be a little bit challenging at times. But I know you were talking about that. That's kind of one of the things that you guys are looking forward to be able to integrate. So I'd love to just hear your experience with that and kind of where you guys are wanting to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I actually just in the last couple of months got my period, my first cycles, and it was an amazing relief after, you know, 18, 19 months or whatever it was. But I think the reality of what is known now is we very much built technology around looking at regularity, and we have machine learning within the app. So to start with, I want to explain one of the other principles of what we designed was to build an app that didn't ever sell data. So it's really important for us that we don't sell data as a business model, because we believe that there is other ways in which this data can be used to help you better understand yourself. So we have a subscription product within the app, which essentially is all about the recommendations of what can be recommended to somebody based on nutrition or exercise to help optimize around cycle health. So a lot of the work and the research that we're doing is focused on, well, how do we ensure that we're providing additional value and continuing to innovate within the recommendation aspect of what we've built? So the first thing is, no one is regular. Regularity, the whole point of technology is actually to be able to identify nuance. And machine learning, if it's built well, which ours is about understanding how it can learn trends and patterns unique to that specific user or cohort or whatever it might be. And it learns over time. So we've now been live with the app in machine learning context for three years. And, you know, there's a lot of people can be quite afraid of what machine learning is and predictive kind of modeling. You know, when you're looking at something where you're not selling the data. You're not using it to give someone a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're using it to help make recommendation connections between what is cycle data, an understanding of other data within their ecosystem, whether it be things like wearable data like steps, heart rate, temperature, movement. You can start to build a pretty clear picture around what variability looks like for a much broader spectrum of the female experience. And that's really, really important for future research and future understanding, because, as I'm sure the majority of your listeners will know, research is incredibly underfunded and just underdone around women and women's health generally. And so our future vision is to say, okay, we have all these different aggregation points. How do we look at irregularity as the more consistent theme? How do we create an understanding around what irregularity looks like? What are the causal effects of irregularity? Because we also know hormones are just one component of a system. But the one thing about female hormones, which is the reason we use them as our starting point, is there is a way of tracking it around your bleed, because there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. That beginning, middle, and end can vary, and it varies dramatically over life cycles as well. And so our next big innovation is looking at, well, how is the correlation of wearable data looking primarily at heart rate, temperature, and movement as well, also compounding into what might be happening within your cycle. And then that looks at not only cycles from a menstruation perspective, but also in terms of midlife. So as your cycles become more disrupted, as your estrogen levels begin to change, even into perimenopause, into postmenopause, but also how do we look at a system which is about understanding and tracking that without becoming this fear of something's hugely and drastically changed in my mental health, I must be going mad. This is the reality. And actually, if you are graduating through this process of education with us about understanding firstly your cycles, then the irregularity of your cycles and the changes, there's going to be a natural progression of understanding where you're like, hang on, something's actually really changed and very dramatic here. And therefore, Moody's giving me this information, but actually I need to go and see a doctor, or I need to go and see somebody that can really help. So providing more of a kind of signposting around, not ever as a diagnostic tool, because that's not our space, and we don't believe we want to go into that space at all. What we do want to be able to do is say, hey, these are the regular patterns. This is a moment to go and speak to someone. So just being able to signpost, particularly around midlife, where perimenopause becomes more apparent, and there's correlations you can see very clearly around heart rate changes and temperature, disruptions of sleep, and also cycle disruption. And being able to tell people when you go to your doctor or you go to your practitioner or whoever you want to speak to about what this change is, here's the data and the information longitudinally, essentially, to be able to actually feel informed, confident, and articulate in the conversation you're having with that practitioner. Because the first thing any expert is going to ask you is, how often are you experiencing your symptoms and how long has that been going on for? And often people are disarmed by that, because you kind of think, oh, actually, I think it was about this long, or this is kind of how it's been happening. And if the kind of tool itself, it should be designed in a way where it gives you the information so you feel like you can walk into that meeting or that kind of consultation and feel ready to say exactly what you need to say. So that's the future in terms of the kind of evolution, but it's happening now. We've just launched wearable integration. So you can actually update the app and integrate wearables now. So bringing in kind of all wearables. So we've been agnostic of wearables. And then the next stage will be the kind of signposting piece, which is really exciting.
Very cool. Yeah. And it is pretty amazing how intuitive the app is, because like it'll say, my cycle is coming and it starts a couple days early, and I can go in and I can edit, and it will literally change the day. It'll go from, oh, you're in day 14 to, nope, you're in day this, and it changes, and you get your like little daily, like, here's where you are, and this is maybe how you're feeling. And then I'll go in and I'll change it, and it changes that information. And so, it's not just like it's literally going based off of what your cycle is. It's not just a general, cookie cutter, like this is what you should be experiencing. It's like, no, this is actually where you're at based on your hormones.
And it learns over time. So the more that you engage with it, the more that it learns in terms of actually the trends and the pattern recognition. Because, there's a big kind of fear around, AI and machine learning, but actually really when used in the context of something which is there to be able to reflect pattern recognition back to you. It's not there to tell you what to buy or to tell you what to kind of, listen to and understand the kind of wider spectrum of your life. It's just simply there to reflect the pattern recognition of your cycle, your data in a meaningful way that helps you make sense of it. Because the other thing about a lot of health data is it's incredibly overwhelming. It's like really detailed. You get all these graphs and all this information, and I find it, I've been in data for a long time and I find it incredibly overwhelming, quite difficult to understand. And so actually, in a way, what you just want is something that makes sense of it and reads to you like a friend or somebody that's a very informed practitioner giving you information about what you need to do with that data. That's what Moody is. It's the lens over all of that back end. And, I'm very proud of what we built, actually. It's a really exciting position to be in now.
Yeah, and it really is very impressive, and I've been using it for, I think I'm on 2 years.
Amazing. So even because I would say about 2 years ago it got good. I'm always really impressed with people that have been using it since like 20, because honestly the app was so bad at the beginning because we couldn't this is the challenge, right? You
minimal viable product
somewhere. Minimum viable product, 100%. You have to start somewhere, and we started without any machine learning. We were just using a very, very basic model of, okay, you have 26 days in your cycle and then repeat those 26 days. So there was no intuitive adaptation or learning as you talked about just then. It was really, really basic. It was just, we are essentially assuming everyone's cycle is exactly the same and lasts exactly the same length. And obviously the majority of people thought the app was really shit and stopped using it because also I shouldn't swear, but it was, it was really, but we had to start there because to build something that effectively predicts and looks at emotional, physical symptom change, not just at fertility and contraception, you have to start with proprietary data sets. You can't just then go, okay, well, we're just going to guess this, or you have to actually have the data to train the machine learning to be able to actually understand the process. So, and I think it's also one of the reasons I really feel it's important to talk about the positive aspects of technology where they supplement the elevation of life rather than this kind of endless reality where we're in complete tension and contradiction with technology a lot of the time. If we can just use technology to help guide, literally like a weather forecast, and I always use that as my reference, like it's scary times out there at the moment where it's very difficult to predict the weather because the kind of changes within, meteorological data and generally across the world are so varying. But the one thing that is useful for is if we know it's going to rain, we know it's going to be sunny, it's helpful. And this is a similar thing, like we're using a very similar principle. If you know that you're going to be in a certain time frame or space of mind or frame of mind, it's helpful to then navigate. So yeah, and this relationship between how we build technology, which is a positive supplement to life, to elevate the experience, not to become, a negative compounding addiction in our kind of general health and well-being space.
Yeah, with the machine learning and and that whole thing. So my son has type 1 diabetes, and they just created before he would have something that read his blood sugar, and then he would have something else that inserted insulin, but they've now created it where they can communicate, and it learns over time his body, and it adjusts his insulin based on that. And so when he was first diagnosed, we very rarely slept through the night because we were always having to get up and manage it. And because of this machine learning, we very rarely get woke up in the middle of the night because it is just doing it automatically, and it's amazing.
Unbelievable. And that's the thing it's saving, in this instance around this kind of understanding of nuance and understanding the nuance of the human experience. There is a really positive angle for technology in this space, it's just that we get caught in this idea of technology because it's so often the consumption end of technology in terms of the buying, the processing, the social media elements, which have, hugely problematic kind of implications on the way that we live. But I agree. And I think diabetes is a super interesting use case, actually. Some of the best innovation in technology that hopefully will also positively impact kind of broadly into society as well around the general management of glucose levels and the issues that has on, diabetes, but also on obesity levels and other issues which are kind of facing huge amounts of people now. So yeah, I feel very passionately that there are very important spaces for this which help save lives, but also help keep people just happy and healthy and in routine. And I'm so glad you're getting sleep. That is an amazing innovation.
Yes, I know. It was like going back to having a newborn, which I'm sure you can relate with right now.
Yeah.
But we would say that all the time. It's like, oh, it's like having a newborn again. Well, as we wrap up here, Amy, I would love, so there is a free version of the Moody app, which there's a ton of great information just with the free version. Yeah. What is the difference between the free version and the paid version? Because I think that's important for people to understand. Like, yeah, you can come and you can use the app and you can use it for free, but there's also a paid version. And what does that look like?
Yeah, it was really important that we had a really good free version, because it was important that this science, and the baseline is the tracking is free. So you are able to track and forecast for free. The recommendations of what you can do to positively impact and the programmatic kind of solutions that you have are what you pay for. So that's where we are impressing the majority now, our innovation. So things like the wearable data integrations, the ability to track your sleep, correlate your sleep data, your movement, your steps, your calorie burn, all that kind of whole 360 spectrum of data, and use that within the kind of app to help make not just better forecasting, but, you know, more accurate recommendations. And therefore, the other element that we're also looking at is how we elevate that into other products and services as well. So the pay for product is about the recommendations that you get, the accuracy of the recommendations, and the longer term in terms of integrating a broader spectrum of data around wearables, and yeah, the programs. So I think I mean, I'm biased. Obviously, I have the pay for version. And, you know, the thing that I think is different about it is it really helps not just give you the information, but know what to do with it. So yeah, that's the big difference.
Yeah. And even I was impressed with the free version, because, you know, there's these little videos of like, oh, here's a 15-minute yoga practice, or, you know, breathing to support you in this specific day of your cycle. And I was like, that's free? What? You know, and so the free version is very robust, but I've just started to look into the paid version, because I'm finally at a point now where I'm like, okay, I kind of understand my trends, whereas before it felt a little bit overwhelming. But now I'm like, I'm ready to grow and progress in that. So, I love it.
Do you have an Apple Watch, or do you have a wearable?
I do not. No,
you don't.
I don't.
I think that those people that have wearables, the paid for version is even better. I would say, like, it is good, but the wearable stuff is really exciting. And that's the thing that because I wasn't a wearable user at all until just after I had the baby. So 7 months ago. And I started using the wearable and integrating it with the app. And I was like, oh, okay, game changer. I now understand even more what the user experience could be. So yeah, that's a big one.
I'm always nervous to do like an Apple Watch, because I get so distracted. I have to like put my phone on silent, and so I'm like, I don't want something like dinging on my wrist all the time that you have a message. I want to go to it when I'm ready to go to it, and so I've hesitated a little bit.
You know what?
To like, I'm sure
I agree, and actually I think that's the thing. I ended up getting an Apple Watch in the end, which I agree, and I think that my move is actually to have Whoop, because it's actually much more it's the movement correlation, and it's the sleep data correlation. But I agree. I think the message information on the Apple Watch can be distracting. You can turn it off though, which I have done, because I agree it's too much going on all day, every day to have just on your wrist.
Yeah. But I'm like, I already feel like I have ADD, so I have to be, but I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I'm sure there's a way to like sleep mode it or whatever, so you're not getting all those messages.
Yeah, but I agree. It was like a learning how to live with this ability to get the benefit without all the things that I think, again, it feels very masculine actually. Just this kind of idea that you want even more information at your fingertips is just not the way that my brain or kind of body really wants life to work.
Yeah. Amy, this was such a good conversation. I feel like I could talk to you all day. As we wrap up here, I would just love it if you have just one tip for somebody who's listening, whether that is in regards to burnout or whether it's in regards to the app or just supporting females, whatever you have, any last things that you want to say, and then just tell our audience where people can find you guys.
Yeah, I think the obviously understanding your cycle is the best function of the app, and that's brilliant. But one of the things that I do think is often misunderstood when it comes to kind of burnout and a lot of these things is there are really simple practices that you can employ within your general life that can really help reduce stress. And one of the things that sounds sometimes so annoying to say because it's so basic, but hydration, like, the problem with being incredibly stressed and the problem with our bodies being so overstimulated in just the general life and world in which we've created is that we are now chronically dehydrated, and drinking just filtered water isn't always the best, because actually filters within the kind of broader scheme can take out a lot of the minerals and a lot of the mineral kind of baseline of the water in terms of what we need. So it takes out the toxicity, but it also can strip the water of the minerals. So hydrating, but also understanding the balance between additional kind of like salts and sugars within the water and also additional mineral support. So things like magnesium within the water, and adding extra kind of almost like turbochargers to help elevate and balance your body. Because again, we're drinking maybe more water, but are we drinking water in the right way? And it was one of the things that I think completely transformed a lot of my life, was just really understanding how to consume water consistently throughout the day with the right mineral balances to help my body regulate. And it really helps with stress. It helps with detoxification. It helps obviously your liver and your kidneys, which are often overly stretched. So yeah, I harp on about this, but hydration would be my big tip.
That's a great tip. I know I'm supposed to be, I drink a ton of water, too much water. And so, it was recommended that I drink more electrolytes.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't love them. And so I'm like, I really need to get more consistent on that. But what you just said, I was like, okay, that's like a little kick in the pants, Sheree, get it together.
Well, we've got a product launching next year, which is a hydration product specifically formulated for female bodies. So the reason I harp on about it is I was going on about it so much endlessly and giving all these different hilarious kind of almost wives' tales recipes. And someone even said to me actually in an interview, was like, why don't you just make a product for this? And I was like, that is a very good point. So we have actually formulated something, but it's going to be live next year. And I'm very biased in this, but it's got antioxidant, it's got electrolytes. It doesn't taste powdery and awful. It tastes really good. And it will be live next year. So yeah, from January.
Oh,
so I'll send you some to try.
Back on when that launches. We'll have to have you back on and talk about it. Will that only be available in the UK, or is that going to come to the US?
It will be in the US. So that will be available in the US in January. So at the moment, we're just selling it in the UK, but we're bringing it to the US soon. We just wanted to test it out, and everyone's loving it and it's doing well. So yeah, it's going to come over to the US in January. And yeah, but it will be all on the best place to find out what's going on actually with the app is on the Instagram page, which is at Moody Month. And then the app obviously is available on iOS and also on Android. So wherever, Google Play and Apple App Store. And then, yeah, everything from an updates point of view, though, is best to check out the Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today, Amy. I know it's late for you. And you did great. This was such a good conversation. I'm so happy that you came on, and excited for this information to get out into the world and into our audience. And I just hope that people connect with it and get on and start using the app, because I absolutely love it. So thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. We will be back next week. Thank you so much for listening to the Insurance Revolutionized podcast today. We know there is a lot on your plate, so it means the world to us that you stopped in to give us a listen. We hope you will join us each week as we dive into topics such as mindset, goal setting, productivity, self-care, and so much more. We want to inspire more women to have success without sacrificing what is most important to them, and we need your help. If this podcast has inspired you, would you do us a favor? Would you take a minute to leave us a rating and a review or share with your friends? Let's change the face of insurance for women. Until next time.